Hi everyone. Yeah, I think this is sad, but not so sad because we will have some after party, I think, and this is also good news for everyone. Um, Wait a second, please, because this is okay. Yeah, ready to go. So my name is Alexis Santos, and I work at Bumble, and today I'm here to talk about adopting SwiftUI at scale. But before that, let me tell you a little bit about the company, if this works. Yeah, let's go. So Bumble is the parent company of three different products, Bumble, Badoo, and Fruits. And it's a platform that enables people to create connections and build healthy relations. Our applications are available in more than 190 countries and is translated into more than 50 languages as well. We have three offices with engineering teams based in London, Barcelona, and Austin. We also have a small office in Dubai at the moment, and we have more than 700 employees across the globe. So that's all about the Bumble company, and now let's go and dive into the topic of the day, which is SwiftUI. Okay, let's start with the description from Apple. This is official one by the Apple website saying that SwiftUI helps you build great-looking applications across all the platforms with the power of Swift and surprisingly little amount of code. And it can bring a better experience to everyone on any Apple device and using just one set of tools and APIs. So when I checked on this description, I was surprised and decided to go and have a look. And yeah, okay, so far so good. This interface looks very nice, very neat. We have a Kanban, which is on the right-hand side. And this Kanban describes perfectly all the code that you are writing in real time. So everything seems very synchronous and more, let's say, more consistent than when you work with storyboards and when you use UIKit in general. Okay, that sounds good. And then I went and checked the syntax. That's like 2 or 3 years ago. And when I checked this code, I was surprised how nice it is. I love it because everything that you can see on the screen is being represented on the Kanban straight away. And there is no point of misynchronization. Everything is always reactive to every event. And the description that you can read is what you can actually see. This is because this code is made on purpose to support this synchronicity. This is leading to many benefits like not having silly crashes and to keep all your interfaces always in line with the final, let's say, product that you are going to deliver. It's very easy to read as well. And what about animations? So every nice UI kit should contain some sort of animations, and I checked the tutorials from Apple, and I did them, and they look like really neat. Apple is really good at doing tutorials now. They never did it before, but now you go step by step, and they are the best. I mean, even Ray Wenderlich will be jealous of that. They are so good. When you play with them, and you do this one, which is the more advanced one, it's very simple. It takes like around half an hour to build this amazing interface and with all the animations. And if I try to do this in UIKit, I don't even know if I will finish in like a week or a few good days to do it. And that's nice. Okay, then I say, oh, SwiftUI is amazing. I love it. I really like working with this technology. But that was like 2 years ago. And it was always when I was working with the tutorials and with the small code base. What happened? Almost 2 years ago, after I researched and I started to play with this technology, we had a meeting in our company with, these are not my bosses, but they look very similar. So we had a meeting with them, and what happened is that they say, okay, Alexis, as usual, we need to be faster. And I said, like, faster? How faster? Faster. And I said, but we are already fast. No, faster than faster. We need to deliver and ship the code faster than we do because we need to reach our clients. We need to ensure that all the features can be delivered on time. And I'm like, okay, how many features do we want to deliver? We already deliver a lot. No, we need to go faster. Okay, so SwiftUI to the rescue. I was thinking, okay, I know this technology, I love it. Because I love this technology and I think it's going to be nice and I play with it, I convinced the CTO and the engineering leadership team that, okay, this may be an alternative and we may use this to be faster. And okay, what happened? Well, SwiftUI was amazing and I knew that and I tried. But then I started to have some questions like, okay, I did it in a small project and it worked well for me. I did the tutorial, it worked well for me, but will it really work for the rest of our team, which is quite big? Will they like it? And there were so many questions. I started to think about all of this. So we had a few challenges at the very beginning. I will tell you about them. So we had iOS 12 support, and when you have iOS 12, it literally means you cannot use SwiftUI because it's not supported. So we had to get rid of this problem. And then we had another challenge, which is SwiftUI 1.0 is very unstable. And I didn't know that because I never actually played with this at big scale. And as I said, we have many applications, many languages, many countries to support, and so on and so on. So, okay, I had more questions. We have in our code base more than 330 frameworks, and they are architected in a very specific way. And this is a challenge because when you have so many frameworks, several applications consume these frameworks. The code that you write for those frameworks will be compatible with these applications and the other way around. So if I introduce SwiftUI in one of them, but one of the applications cannot access this code anymore, okay, I'm done because then this code is unusable for half of the company. I had to get a solution for that. And again, the same, because we have multiple applications consuming, every code that I introduce should be very mindful, and I should be very mindful on how do we do it. We saw here very good strategies about how to resolve some of these problems, and I will say these are very complementary talks because we apply some of these technical solutions, and I have to share also, apart from these solutions, some of our experience. We have a very rapidly growing team. Our team is very large and keeps increasing. And when you have so many team members, there are also challenges to overcome. And last but not least, lack of expertise in SwiftUI. None of all this rapidly growing team, none of them was expert in SwiftUI, especially not at this scale. You could be an expert on SwiftUI in a pet project, but then when you have all these challenges, it's a different problem, and you need to deal with it. So I'm going to tell you our plan and how we went through this. It doesn't mean that this plan is the best or is the best way to resolve the problem. It's our plan, and I really hope that it can reassure you that this is, okay, this is how they did it, how we did it. Maybe it can help you to also be convinced that there are ways to resolve it. So let's start. Don't pay much attention to this. I will tell you about it, and it will be growing a little bit, but we divided the plan in two different main stages. The first one is the prototype, and it sounds obvious, right? So we wanted to have like a small prototype in our project, and for that we created a SwiftUI squad based on, composed of 4 iOS developers that will be dedicated to that problem. So we will research, analyze the problem, and create a small prototype inside of our application that in our case was the settings screen. It's a low traffic area of the application where you don't have many users. You can A/B test it. And we will start understanding how SwiftUI can be introduced and how to overcome all the challenges. But this proof of concept had to be production-ready code, because otherwise we wouldn't have this reassurance that it can actually be shipped and can actually fix these problems. On this stage, we also work on builds and continuous integration and testing framework. Because we are a testing-first company, we needed to ensure that every code that we ship, even this prototype, is tested. So we had to work on these tools. From that, we really have some tips to share with you because this prototype gave us a lot of information. And the first of all is you should probably start small, as I said. Don't start writing SwiftUI it's my advice. Don't start writing SwiftUI everywhere. Start small, pick a simple screen, low traffic, and then set an A/B test where you can always toggle the feature in production if the worst will happen, if you have crashes or something. So this sounds obvious. So to keep an eye on the crashes after this prototype because issues could happen, and because we don't have experience on this technology, we had to be able to react very quickly. The other tip I will say is involve your QA or test your application early. And when I mean involve them, it means that they should be part of the squad and understand how SwiftUI works so that they can adapt their tools. In our case, we have internal tools where we write our automation tests. So we had to adapt all these tools for supporting the views from SwiftUI because they didn't work in advance. But because we did it in advance, we didn't have to care about that problem anymore, and we could keep growing the adoption inside the company with all the tools set and everything ready. The tip here is iOS 13 contains many bugs. And I think the way we resolved this, we started with the prototype, and we found out that there are bugs that you can see in this screen, actually. This is a fake screenshot of the real Bumble, actually. These red lines represent the first feedback we got from QA. We thought this screen is ready, and our QA took the screen and gave it back to us and said, hey, you see? This is not the right color, this is not the right font, you have only a single line, you don't support multi-line here. And the problem was that we didn't realize them, but even worse than that, we couldn't fix many of them in SwiftUI in iOS 13.0. But when we switched to 13.1, they disappeared. They were fixed. So the very first version of SwiftUI is not recommended, and that will be my advice on this topic. Always prefer 13.1 onwards. The very first version Apple released contained bugs that are very hard to resolve, and you probably don't want to waste your time on them. If I'm real honest, I will go with 14, actually. 13.1 is okay, but 14, from the 13.1 to 14, there are more than 1,000 bugs fixed by Apple. New tools introduced that are key for you. So we are still not there. We will switch to 14 soon, but we have a strategy where we have some conditionals in some features to be able to use them in iOS 14. So we have plans to do that, but even though we did the 13.1 at the beginning, I will recommend if you can wait until 14 and start from there, it will be much better. One of the reasons is because iOS 14 is SwiftUI 2.0, and 2.0 is much more polished and is more usable and friendly for developers as well. One of the other tips is, okay, we have multiple modules, as I mentioned, and this is like a brief description. Probably it's like a mock, but it describes very well our architecture in terms of modularization, not architectural pattern. It's not like model view model or the composable architecture. No, it's not like that. It's a pattern of modules. And these modules contain dependencies between them. So we had to be clear on how are we going to introduce SwiftUI in this picture so that the applications will continue consuming them. So in order to help, Apple provides these tools, which we also recommend. You can have conditional imports to import your framework in specific files. You can have the if available for a specific iOS version. If you really want to deliver one specific functionality only in iOS 14, for example, you can always agree with your product manager or with the product lead that your feature could be only supporting these users, depending on revenue or depending on the user base that you have in your company. And another one that we also love is using the available tag and always mark which versions are supported. And what I mean with this is very obvious. I mean, Apple offered this, but what I'm saying is, and the learning here is because you have so many functionalities that support SwiftUI, you want to keep track of them in a consistent way so that you don't forget which part of your code is using SwiftUI and which part isn't. But you don't want to limit yourself and isolate SwiftUI in a corner and always grow little by little, because it could mean that very limited amount of developers could use SwiftUI. So we prefer to allow every developer, every team to use it using conditionals and ensure that we maintain all the code base in order, and we always are able to spot where SwiftUI is and what are the conditions for that implementation. Another hot topic in general is how to interop between UIKit and SwiftUI. I will be brief here. I'm not going into detail, but my tip will be that UI hosting controller is your friend. This is good. We found very easy to embed SwiftUI into UIKit, but not the other way around. We found extremely hard to manage UI view representable because the life cycle of UIKit is not reactive in most of the cases, and you need to support that. Also, the layout system is tricky because of the intrinsic content size and the calculations. We found easier to actually implement the components that we wanted to use in SwiftUI from UIKit in SwiftUI by ourselves. So instead of adapting, we prefer to rewrite, and that was easier in most of the cases. Okay, now we are in the second part of our plan. That was all the learnings from the first part. We learned a lot of technicalities, and all of them gave us a good understanding of the technology and led us to compose an extended plan. And we call it the pilots. And the pilots was basically 2 different features that were more difficult than the previous one, more challenging. And in this case, we started to involve other teams. It was not just the SwiftUI team anymore, but we had 2 different feature teams collaborating with us, and they were in charge of implementing these features. And for that, we decided to start preparing sharing knowledge. We had to prepare guidelines and onboarding documentation for those developers. Let me tell you about that. So, because we increased the complexity, we had to have a proper plan for sharing all the tips that I'm sharing here today with the rest of developers. But not only that, we had to start communicating with people that may not like SwiftUI so much. We had to convince them with real facts, with numbers and metrics, that this is the technology that we want to use and the way to go. We also validated our assumptions, and because we validated the assumptions with this prototype, it will be easier in the future to keep rolling out and keep adopting. So the tip is communicate your goals with the rest of the team and communicate your guidelines, especially with managers, so they can allow your team to have time to prepare for the new technology. Not everybody is expert or have a good understanding on SwiftUI, and they shouldn't. So your manager should be capable or should allow time for them to do this extra step. And as a team, as a technical team or iOS team, you should be pushing this knowledge sharing, informational tips and communication with the rest of the team. In order to do that, we set a proper education and training, let's say, environment in our team. And we started by creating a wiki page. Again, sounds obvious, but it shouldn't be overlooked, because all the information that I describe here are questions that other 50 or 60 iOS developers may have inside your team, or 100, and then they will come to you with these questions again. And you may have even forgotten why you took that decision. So we always kept track of every issue that was found, every knowledge that we learned on our wiki page internally and visible for every developer. Also, we created tech talks, internal ones, for the most tricky part and for all the learnings for our developers. Record them and keep them also as part of the wiki page for future reference. Also, we have a Udemy, let's say in our team we have a corporate Udemy account where we can create learning paths, and this learning paths is just a course that you see in Udemy. Because we had this corporate account, we could just customize them for our own resources or external resources related to SwiftUI. You don't need Udemy account. You can just create simple document with a learning path, but we really recommend having a learning path for your team. This is not the wiki page. This is not where you post the learnings, all the issues. No, here you create a course with all the articles and all the steps that a new developer should follow in order to be able to code in your code base in SwiftUI. It could contain internal trainings, internal videos, or external. There are a lot of nice articles out there, or this nice tutorial from Apple. And they should start from simple use cases and keep growing. And we ask every developer to finish the learning path before they actually touch any code. That reassures us that they actually understand what they are going to do. And they really appreciate it, because if they have any questions, they can ask the SwiftUI mentors about these questions. Basically, we created a small squad of evangelists on our team, the experts that participated before, and we created a Slack channel, and they are always paying attention to any issues, and anyone, new developers in the team that are starting with SwiftUI, could come and ask questions or ask for help. So let's say the tip here is, for me, this is probably the most important part of the project, because if you implement a prototype and it works for you, okay, that's fine, but are you going to implement all the features the rest of the year? No, probably not. Your team will do it. So you need to ensure that you can scale the transfer of knowledge, and this helps us a lot. Now this is automatic. We don't really go one by one teaching every developer, look, you should start adding observables, or the view model should be here. No, they just go by themselves. When they find suitable time, they do it, and then they start coding. If they have any question, they come back to the SwiftUI mentors, they ask the question, and we help. That's it. What is the current state of the project? Well, this is becoming more complex, but actually, we are here. We are in a moment where the overhead of introducing SwiftUI is decreasing and the speed is growing. We are going faster, not as faster as our bosses wanted, but we are getting there. And let me share with you some of the numbers. Before that, most of the teams are already writing SwiftUI as well. And yeah, basically, code-base adoption. We have 10.23 of code-base. It's a very precise number. We track it very well. Migrated to SwiftUI, and we keep track of this because we want to set goals. Approximately 60% of our developers are experienced with SwiftUI, but that's fine. It's a really good number, because probably 30% of the developers that don't have this experience are from platform teams, and they probably will never write SwiftUI. So it's a pretty good number as well. We have a design system, and that's another topic. You need to migrate these components to SwiftUI. So we started migrating the core components, the ones that we use everywhere, and they are already migrated. It was kind of easy, and as I mentioned before, it's easier to migrate to SwiftUI than adapting. So we just, created a framework, SwiftUI, blah, 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 framework components, and we started to create the new components one by one. And now the rest of the components are done under demand. So if we need a feature that requires a specific components, we write it. It doesn't really take much time because SwiftUI is good, especially with small components or UI, pure UI components. It's really good. So it's not a big deal for us. And then we have a plan for the full code base adoption. We have a goal, which is we aim 2 years, approximately 2 years for full migration. Maybe this is not the goal of your companies, it's fine. This is our goal, we wanted to do it. And that's because we think that everything that took us here is going well, and we became more confident now, and we became more ambitious with this. So we are kind of confident to come here to the other part of the world and say, hey, in 2 years we may be having SwiftUI, because everything I told you before really worked well for us. So we decided to switch to SwiftUI by default. Now I want you to picture something. Imagine that instead of these guys, it's messy, you know, with the t-shirts and like, because I had this photo, I had to remove it because it wasn't really my image, but yeah, picture it. This is really successful for us. It was like really successful. And okay, what's next? Because there is always something else to do. So we had to adapt our architecture, and now I'm talking about the model view model architecture, to be more seamless with SwiftUI. We didn't tackle that problem yet. Let me tell you something. I mean, model view model just works, and it's fine. You don't need to do it at the beginning. You don't need to care about that problem from scratch. This is our next step, and it can be done asynchronously. Same with adoption of Combine. We would like to create patterns and agreements on how we actually will use Combine, but we are not even sure what Apple is going to do with this because they keep releasing new technologies, and there are so many other reactive patterns and observables and so on that we still need to research. That's fine. We postpone it. And, well, it may seem a bit, I don't know, controversial, but we don't have SwiftUI navigation yet. But Apple also doesn't really have one that is like final. So we are waiting for a more finalized framework, and in the meantime we are just using hosting view controllers and pure plain UIKit navigation at the moment, and that's all right in our case. We can live with this. We will do it at some point. So if we go back to the original question when I started, and I asked myself, like, is SwiftUI amazing? And if you ask me again, I will say yes, I think it is, and we like it. We use it, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Alexis.
Thank you.
Okay, no. Can you hear me?
I do.
Sorry, not sure what is happening, sorry.
Okay, now, thank you, Alexis, for your great talk. And we have some questions for you. Mauri asks, I understand the new UI development should be in SwiftUI, but why migrate UIKit productive code that already works and isn't likely to change?
That's a good question, actually. We at Bumble or in our team don't like having legacy code, and that's something that we just do. I don't think you should be pragmatic here. You should do what is best for your company, what you can do with your team, with your developers. In our case, we When we stick to some new technology, we really want to stick to 100%. So we had a plan to, for example, we had Objective-C in the code. We had a plan of 2 years to migrate to Swift. And why is that? We do it because basically all the tools that Apple is releasing and supporting are almost every time is for the latest technology that they deliver. So we don't want to be in 2 years in a position where half of our code base is not ready to acquire this new tech stack. And also because let's say what's the name? Philosophy, that's the word, at Bumble is to always stick to the best tech stack or the newest one. And because of that, we are always trying to do rollout and adoption as soon as we can, but in a safe way. So that's it.
Okay, nice. So why do you support iOS 13 if iOS 14 and even 15 support the same devices?
Can you repeat the last part?
Yes, so basically iOS 14 and 15 support the same devices as
Oh
iOS
yeah, that's
13.
a good question. That's what everyone in my company asked me personally, because they check the numbers, right? They check the metrics and they say, hey, we have, let's say, okay, made up number, 0.3% of users in iOS 13, but I asked them, can you check the revenue incoming from these users? And the revenue is enough to keep it. So it's not about the amount of users, it's about the revenue per registered users. And unfortunately, or fortunately, Bumble generates revenue enough to keep it until the very last moment. And that's the only reason.
Okay, nice. How costful do you expect the migration to be once the architecture is adapted to SwiftUI? More equal, less costful than rewrite?
No. I think it will be similar, but probably our developers will be happier doing it. Because the problem is when you don't have patterns and they are not standardized, your developers and the new joiners to your team becomes anxious because they are never sure that the code they are writing is good enough. So we want to set standards for that kind of architecture, so that they are always certain what they should do. You join the company, check the documentation, this is how I build my feature, and that's it. So I don't think it's going to be faster in terms of writing the feature, but faster in terms of onboarding and supporting this on a scale.
Okay, thank you. How do you handle SwiftUI limitations? Do you wrap around UIKit?
SwiftUI?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, basically, we always stick to screens inside hosting view controllers, and because we don't do navigation and we don't share the code between different screens I mean, we don't mix and match them. So if one screen is SwiftUI, we try to stick to that one. And we always try to stick to full screens. Not every single time, but we always try to do that. And also we have pure frameworks that are mostly SwiftUI. And as a last tip, we have something similar to what Pablo explained before, which is very nice. We have these workspaces modules where we put all the SwiftUI code in there, and it is like fast compilation. So I recommend that talk from Pablo as well, because it's exactly what we do.
Okay. How did you manage to sell to your product or management people the urge to migrate to SwiftUI?
Yeah, that's good. That worked the other way around. They asked me to do it. So basically we had that meeting, they say we need to be faster, and they put a few options on the table. And let me tell you, one option was React Native, another option was Flutter, and then we had a question about what can be faster. And I said, guys, probably SwiftUI is not faster, but everyone here knows Swift, and I guess we can continue and stick to that technology rather than hiring a whole new team to do React Native. That was how it happened. It's not, we didn't push it from the bottom, it came from the top.
I think that every one of us will need your team.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have some feedback.
Okay.
Fix the keyboard dismiss bug urgently. you have some feedback report
From
here,
Bumble.
it seems.
Okay, I'll take it. Thank you for sending me this feedback, and please send me more if you want. I mean, you can find me probably on Twitter or ask for the details to the organizer. Send me all the feedback you want, and I will push it.
Okay, so great talk from Joan, and thank you.
Oh, thank you, Johan.
How can you avoid ending up with massive pyramid code when using SwiftUI?
Massive pyramid code with?
SwiftUI, I imagine it's the bunch of
Well,
code.
I mean, SwiftUI is better in managing that situation because it's very easy to extract and compose. I guess it was much harder with UIKit when you had massive, let's say, not massive view controllers, but part of it was UI. So we just try to, first of all, create patterns, as I said, like architectural patterns to avoid that, but also stick to responsibility of developers. If something gets bigger than certain amount of certain size, we extract the code. But in general, another tip is because we have a design system in place and every component is already standard and separated, we are mostly like designers taking these components and just putting them on the screens and creating the layout. So basically, componentize.
Okay. Another one. Great presentation. Do you ask for SwiftUI as a requirement for new hires in order to increase adoption? If not, do you see it being one in the near future?
Oh, no, we don't. We don't do that. We are quite happy hiring people without experience on SwiftUI, but once you get to the team, you probably need to go through the course, and probably we will expect you to actually code in SwiftUI. I mean, you will have time to learn and go through that stage. You will have plenty of time, but it's not a requirement. What I will expect is that in a few years, the candidates will expect us to have SwiftUI because they may not know UIKit. We are getting ready for them, actually.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alexis.
Thank you.